In today's video, I'm going to be covering 10 red flags to be aware of if you're working with virtual assistants. Maybe you've just hired a virtual assistant in your reselling business or your online business, and maybe you're thinking like, I don't know if this is working out. I don't know if this is the right person for me. I feel like something is off. Like you're sensing these red flags, right? And I've worked with literally over 100 virtual assistants over the last 10 years. Right now, I've got about 17 virtual assistants that I work with across my various businesses, my Amazon business, Replaying Catcher, social media, video editors, developers, customer service. And I'll tell you right now, having a really good virtual assistant, it can change your life for the better, for the best. I mean, honestly, like I wouldn't be able to grow all my different businesses if I didn't have virtual assistants. But on that same coin, on the other side of that coin, they can ruin your life. They can stress you out. They can cause problems. They can waste your time. You could lose a bunch of money. And I spent the last 20 minutes writing down these 10 red flags because I've had to fire a lot of people over the years. And yeah, without further ado, let's just cut to the chase. I think this will be able to help you guys out a lot if you're hiring or you're thinking about firing or you're on the fence. So without further ado, let's dive into this video and do me a favor, smash that like button. Red flag number 1, okay? And this is probably my top red flag. And I guess that this would depend upon your personality, but for me, this is super important, and that's communication. You could have the most skilled virtual assistant, right, who is just super talented at sourcing or shipping or a video editor, but if they do not communicate and, they take forever to respond, maybe you send them a message and it takes, 48 hours, 72 hours to respond. And I'm not talking about like an agency. I'm talking about like you're working with a full-time virtual assistant. In my opinion, that's not acceptable because, at least with like a reselling business, things are moving very quick. So you need to have that open dialogue and you need to have that communication. So, if your VA takes forever to respond, they're ignoring messages. One of the pet peeves that I have is, and of course, this is during, work hours, they see my message and you could see that they see it if you use like Facebook or, Slack or whatnot, and they just ignore it for hours and hours. It drives me freaking insane. Now, I'm not saying you need instant replies, but you need that consistency. You need that clarity. You need that accountability. So for me, if somebody doesn't communicate, if they take forever, if it's just like so stressful to have to just talk to them because business is all about communication. Honestly, if that's happening over and over and over again, right? I'm not saying like with these red flags, just know, if it happens once or twice here and there, I'm not talking about that. But if it's consistently over and over again, I'm telling you guys, fire them. Red flag number 2, and again, I'm gonna preface this video because I know there's gonna be people in the comments giving me a hard time. I'm not saying if these things happen once or maybe twice. I'm talking if these things are happening over and over again, because you're gonna notice that when you start to work with virtual assistants and different personalities, there's gonna be patterns that occur, right? Over and over again. And some of them are gonna be great. Some of them aren't gonna be the best. And nobody's perfect at the end of the day, but you've got to ask yourself, is this best for the business? Is this something that is, good for your mental health? But the second one is making the same mistake over and over again. Now, as the boss, the owner, the employer, you're at fault. I'm at fault if my team is making the same mistake over and over again and I'm not giving them standard operating procedures, I'm not training them. If I'm ignoring them and ghosting them and not communicating, then you deserve it. But if you find yourself explaining and creating SOPs and communicating and, the mistake just keeps happening over and over again, they're neglecting the conversations you've had, the commitments they've made with you, they're neglecting the SOPs. In my opinion, they're not listening. And this is the case sometimes with virtual assistants, and it's one of two reasons. Number one, they don't respect you and they don't care. Maybe they're working with other people and they're just like, whatever. I'm used to just running over employers and I'm gonna just see how far I can push this person's boundaries. Or two, sometimes it's a language barrier as well. Now with tools like ChatGPT and AI, sometimes it might be better to communicate via text versus, being on a Zoom call. So you do have to kind of understand, is there a language barrier, especially if you're working with somebody in the Philippines? And if that's important to you to be able to vocalize the communication, make sure you hire somebody who, could understand you. But making the same mistake over 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. The reality is, when you're starting to work with a virtual assistant, after about it could even be a couple of weeks, but even a month or two, they typically are who they are, right? And I think we're all that way. People don't change very often. Very few people change. So just know if your virtual assistant continues to make mistakes over and over again, you're gonna have to live with that or possibly fire them. Red flag number 3, okay? Constant excuses and blaming everything, right? Blaming the internet. This is a good one that I always hear all the time. And there are a lot of internet issues like in the Philippines and whatnot. Sometimes the weather is pretty rough. So, it happens. There are going to be internet issues. There are going to be power outages. There's going to be maybe issues with a software or a server is down or failures in technology. Things are going to come up. But if every single time there's a problem and they're always just blaming, in my opinion, that's a problem because your virtual assistant isn't taking personal responsibility. And this is something that I always communicate very upfront when I'm hiring people. As I say, I'm looking to work with people who are not 100% perfect. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes, but I want somebody who takes responsibility. And I want somebody who speaks up, especially in the Philippines, again, because I work with a lot of folks in the Philippines. A lot of the Filipinos are very shy. And I found that you have to really encourage them to speak up and be honest. But, if you find that the person you're working with every single time, there's always another excuse, they're always pointing fingers and blaming, that could be a problem and you might not want to work with that person. Number 4, red flag number 4, and this is a big one. Not willing to learn new things, okay? I think this is one of the most important things to look for when you are hiring a virtual assistant, and that's somebody who has a personality who's willing to adapt, who's willing to learn new things. And a lot of virtual assistants I've noticed over the years, they want to be comfortable, they want to be complacent, and I guess depending on the business or the role or the task that you're giving them, maybe they could become complacent. But at least in my businesses, there's always changes, especially with like Amazon. There's always rule changes and different softwares and new strategies and processes. And if every single new task or new thing that they need to learn or SOP is met with frustration or resistance or complaining, you're gonna freaking just feel stuck and stressed out. I mean, comfort and complacency, they do not scale a business. And you want people who are adaptable and curious and people who are willing to grow. So, if you find yourself constantly feeling like, I want to grow the business, but I know if I give this person this new task or if I switch something up, they always get mad and upset. That's gonna be a problem. And unfortunately, it's on me and it's on you as the, owner of the business to realize, wow, this person, maybe I need to have a conversation with them and communicate, hey, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling. I want to grow, but I always feel like every time I share a new task or a new SOP, you kind of get overwhelmed or overworked. I mean, it's something to keep in mind. I think I covered that pretty well, but definitely something really important is finding someone who's willing to learn new things. And if not, you might have to let them go. Red flag number 5, this is one that I've had before, not all the time, but I've worked with people who they're just consistently negative. They have a negative attitude. And for me personally, not only does that destroy like my want or my ability to want to work with them, just because I hate working with people who are negative and super pessimistic, but it destroys the culture, right? If you've got somebody on your team, and I've had this before, we've had it with partners and different things like that. People are just negative and they just see the world as just like everything's a problem, and that's just no way to run a business, right? So obviously no one's going to be positive all the time. That's not realistic, but chronic negativity is a deal breaker. But one of the big things that is important to me is having good energy with the people that I'm working with. So if you find someone who's consistently negative, especially in the beginning, if it keeps getting worse and worse, honestly, I don't think I'd want to work with that person. Red flag number 6, and this is probably more than a red flag, but lying, cheating, and unethical behavior. Matter of fact, back in, I think this was 2018 or 2017, I used to run a membership called The Green Room. It was similar to Reselling Freedom. It was like an Amazon-based community, and we had members and training and videos. It was run by me and a couple other guys. Well, one of the girls who was in charge of our customer service, she started messaging our customers, right? Because she had access to like Stripe and all that information and their emails, and she knew who like joined and paid money. She was literally emailing them behind the scenes, trying to get extra money for them, sharing a whole sob story, this and that. And I mean, it was really bad. It looked so bad on us, and we had to let her go. But that's just one example, I guess, of unethical behavior. But if you start catching your virtual assistants lying to you, even small white lies, cheating and cutting corners, honestly, you're setting yourself up for problems. And if somebody's willing to, break their moral compass, and you catch them, I mean, it's just gonna happen over and over again. So lying, cheating, unethical behavior, bye. Red flag number 7, missing deadlines and not respecting your time. Now again, I'm not trying to come off like a jerk and, saying everyone's gonna be perfect and I don't miss deadlines, I miss deadlines. I mean, it happens, but there are virtual assistants who it almost feels like they don't take your business serious. Deadlines are ignored. Usually comes with poor communication. They'll use that as an excuse. Everything is done on their timeline, not yours. When someone joins your team, they need to respect the business, the process, and the processes and deadlines. If everything's always late, it's not a skill issue, it's a respect issue. And again, I know you're probably expecting more like strategy and more like detailed information here about like red flags, but a lot of this stuff is like psychological. It's with personalities, and some personalities, they just will not respect you. They will not respect the business, and they almost have like an entitlement attitude, right? Like, I'm so special. I do it when I want. I'm not a part of a team. You should be lucky to have me. And of course, I'm super grateful for my entire team, but we all have to be lucky for one another. We're all part of this team and we're not special, right? None of us are special. We're all special because we come together, as corny as that sounds. So, not respecting your time, missing deadlines over and over and over again, honestly, you should probably just fire them. All right, number 8, this is one that, drives me nuts, and that's working with virtual assistants who constantly need to be micromanaged. Obviously in the beginning, when you're training, you have to go slow, you have to micromanage, you have to hold their hand, you have to be there for them. But there's some virtual assistants who it's just like every single task, nonstop, you have to follow up. Make sure they're hitting the deadlines. You have to babysit the work. In my opinion, you don't have a freaking virtual assistant if that's the case. You have another job having to manage this person. So, depending on how busy you are, like I have a lot of different businesses and things going on. I tell people, I'm gonna give you all the support in the world. You could always message me. You could always reach out. If I create a system or something that's freaking silly or stupid and it's causing problems, or I'm doing something and you're like, this is idiotic, I wanna know, right? Like, my door is open, but there's just people who they won't ask questions, they don't take responsibility, you have to micromanage and hold their hand at every little tiny step. And for me, it's just that absolutely drives me crazy. So if they cannot operate without constant oversight, I don't know, I probably just wouldn't work with that person. So I'd see that as a really big red flag. Number 9, no initiative or problem solving. I was having a phone call with one of my good friends who runs an Amazon business and a Walmart business, and she was complaining to me, and we were both complaining to each other about this happening with some VAs. And pretty much like some VAs, if there's a problem or an issue, they always have to message you, or they'll just ignore it, or they won't fix it because it's like, they don't want to take the initiative. Like they know how to fix a problem, they know how to do it, but like they just won't take the initiative. It's like cookie cutter. This is my job and I will not go outside the box 1%, or like there's a basic easy problem, but like they just won't do it. They know how to do it, but they don't take the initiative. And every small issue completely stops progress, right? And of course, I don't expect perfection, but effort, right? Make an effort. The best VAs, they bring out solutions, right? They think outside the box. They don't just ask questions, right? But they figure things out on their own, and they're willing to make mistakes. That's why it's super important too. And I want to be clear, a lot of times it's our fault because we, train our VAs to always wait for us, to always make sure everything's 100% perfect. Sometimes you have to give your virtual assistants the ability to go out and problem solve and do things and figure things out on their own. Like, I don't want to call them like puppy dogs, but sometimes it's like you have these virtual assistants who won't do anything. They always have to ask every single question. And, that's why you want to give your virtual assistants freedom to make mistakes, right? It's not just the virtual assistant's fault. And I want to be very clear as well. A lot of times we're giving virtual assistants a hard time, but it's not their fault. It's our fault because we've trained them poorly. We haven't communicated. We don't have SOPs. We don't give them the freedom to fail. Every time they make a mistake, you just come down on them and make them feel like crap. And that's your fault. That's my fault. So as much as I'm kind of building this picture out to make it look like it's the VA's fault and the red flags, a lot of these red flags, we're creating them because we're setting the stage. So hopefully that makes sense. And last but not least, red flag number 10 is, how do you feel? Are you stressed out all the time? Is your stress going up, up, up? Are you always just like deep down inside, you're like, this person's driving me nuts? And it's a gut check, right? A virtual assistant is supposed to make your life easier, right? They're not supposed to make your life harder. If you're working with virtual assistants and it's making your life harder and you having to spend more time and micromanage them and you're stressed out all the time and, working with them creates more stress, frustration, and, I'm reading some of my notes here, you gotta pay attention to how you feel. You really, really do. Your body usually knows before your brain wants to admit it. So, you know, even if they're very skilled, sometimes you have to just cut your losses and be like, is it worth freaking messing up my mental health? This person could be running your business, but they're driving me nuts. I had to do this in my business for Rake and Profit earlier this year. I had to let go of somebody who was working with me for about 3 years. And she was in charge of all the customer service and different things. And she was a nice person, but she was driving me freaking nuts. And I was always pissed off at her. And I was always just like, I felt stress on my chest all the time. And I'm like, this is my fault. Like, I got to get rid of this person. And, you know, again, she's still a friend till this day, but it just wasn't a good fit for what I wanted. So, you know, final thoughts, be fair, be honest, be respectful, but don't confuse being kind with tolerating dysfunction. Sometimes firing fast is the most responsible decision for your business and for them. So, you know, if you're seeing multiple red flags that I mentioned on this list, it might be time for you to find someone who is a better fit for you. Again, everybody's going to be different. And I want to be clear. I keep saying this, but I want to make sure it's understood. A lot of these problems and red flags are because we've created them and we haven't trained them properly and we haven't set the stage and we haven't taken the time when, you know, interviewing and hiring and setting SOPs and rules and regulations. You know, a lot of it is our fault. So I want to be clear with that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any more questions, leave a comment down below. But with that being said, much love.